When my son told me he was handling my finances from now on, I didn't argue. I just nodded, signed what he put in front of me, and let him believe I'd fallen for it. 3 weeks later, he and his wife came home to find their accounts frozen, their cars repossessed, and a foreclosure notice on the door. They thought they were stealing from an old man, until they learned who really owned everything. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. I sat at my kitchen table that afternoon, the pen still warm in my hand after signing the document my son Mark brought over. Across from me, Mark shuffled the papers with a forced smile, while my daughter-in-law Vanessa stood by the window, arms crossed. The winter light slanted through the glass, catching the glint of excitement in her eyes. She thought I didn't notice that. "Dad, this is for the best," Mark said softly, as if trying to soothe a skittish animal. He slid the papers into a manila folder. "You've worked hard your whole life. Let us take some of the burden now." His tone was all calculated concern. I could hear the rehearsed quality in it. I simply nodded. "Of course. I appreciate you looking out for me, son." My voice sounded frail, even to my own ears, a tone I had never used on purpose before. It was the sound of an old man conceding control. I saw Mark relax a fraction, believing it. Beside him, Vanessa flashed a quick, satisfied grin before schooling her features back to a mask of sympathy. "Really, Frank, you'll be thankful," Vanessa chimed in, using my first name instead of calling me Dad. She offered a tight smile. "Handling finances can be so stressful at your age. We don't want you worrying about bills or taxes or any of that complicated stuff." Her words dripped with a sweetness that didn't quite reach her eyes. I glanced between them, my only son and the woman he'd married. I felt an ache in my chest that had nothing to do with the mild arrhythmia my doctor warned me about. Is this what we've come to? I wondered. My 34-year-old boy, whom I used to carry on my shoulders, now standing in my own kitchen lying to my face, pretending this was for my benefit. I gave a slow, compliant smile and pushed the folder back toward Mark. "I know I can trust you too. If you say this paperwork will simplify things, I believe you." He visibly exhaled in relief, and for a moment I almost pitied him. He had no idea that the father he thought he was duping was steps ahead of him. But I kept my expression appreciative, even a little confused, just an aging widower grateful for his kid's help. Vanessa stepped forward and placed a light hand on my shoulder. The gesture might have seemed comforting to an outsider, but I caught the slight impatience in the way her fingers tapped. "We'll take care of everything, Frank. You just enjoy your retirement. Maybe plan a trip, or spend time with friends. Don't worry about a thing." I looked up at her, this woman who had been part of our family for 10 years now. She was the picture of polished suburban charm in her cashmere sweater and salon-styled hair. I remembered when I first met her, a bright smile and firm handshake at our Thanksgiving dinner, her arm linked with Mark's. I had welcomed her with open arms. Now that same hand on my shoulder felt like a claw asserting dominance over prey. "All right," I murmured. "I suppose I'll have more free time now." I slid the pen aside, my fingers trembling just a bit. Not from fear or age, but from the anger I was holding in. I hoped they would mistake it for frailty. Mark picked up the folder. "I'll file these with the attorney tomorrow," he said. The power of attorney should go into effect immediately after that. There was a faint quiver in his voice, excitement, I realized. Excitement that he now had legal control over my financial life. He reached over and patted my hand. "You won't regret this, Dad. I promise." I met my son's eyes. Once, those eyes had looked at me with such trust and admiration. As a little boy, he'd cling to my pant leg whenever he was nervous, certain that I could fix any problem. Now those eyes were avoiding mine, darting with nerves and greed. "What happened to you?" I wondered silently. But I just nodded again. "I know you mean well, Mark. Thank you." If I'd said any more, I might have given myself away. Because behind my polite acceptance, a storm of emotions was gathering strength. There was hurt, certainly, an overwhelming sorrow at realizing my own flesh and blood saw me as an easy mark. There was confusion, too. How had we gone from the loving father and son who fixed old cars in the garage, to this polite, distant exchange of lies? But most of all, there was a growing current of determination, cool and steady, cutting through the emotional swell. Something fundamental had shifted inside me at that kitchen table. The naive, trusting father I'd been moments ago receded, and a quieter, shrewder man took his place. They thought they had me. They thought an old man wouldn't notice the fine print or the way their voices shook with anticipation. They were about to learn just how badly they underestimated me. Mark cleared his throat and stood, tucking the folder under his arm. We should get going, traffic will pick up soon. He paused, perhaps waiting for me to question him or express some worry. I didn't. I just rose slowly from the table, as if weighed down by my years. I'll see you both on Sunday, right? I asked, referencing our routine family dinner that had been shrinking in importance lately. Oh, Mark exchanged a glance with Vanessa. She gave a tiny, dismissive shake of her head that she probably thought I didn't catch. Mark cleared his throat. Actually, Dad, we might have to cancel this Sunday. We've been so busy with things. I'll call you, okay? Of course, I said. Busy with things. Too busy to see your father now that you think you control his bank account, I thought bitterly. Take care, son. I walked them to the door on unsteady legs, another little act I put on for their benefit. As I shut the front door behind them, I allowed my face to harden, the polite smile melting away. Through the lace curtain, I watched Mark open the passenger door of their shiny new Mercedes for Vanessa. Ever the gentleman, my son. He hurried around to the driver's side, and I could just make out her profile. She was laughing about something as she fastened her seatbelt. Mark started the car, and they backed out of my driveway. Neither looked back at the house. Only when their car turned the corner and disappeared did I let out the breath I'd been holding. I stepped away from the window, my heart thumping not with fear, but with restrained anger and adrenaline. On the table, the pen I'd used to sign away my autonomy caught my eye. I picked it up, turning it between my fingers. It was a cheap ballpoint, the kind I kept in a jar by the phone for grocery lists and forgotten messages. Funny, how something so small and ordinary could sign away a life's worth of savings and property. At least, that's what Mark and Vanessa believed it had done. I pressed the tip of the pen to a notepad and scrawled a single word, watching the ink trail in bold black: betrayal. My hand was steadier now. There was no need to pretend any longer. In the silent kitchen, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had just happened. My son, my only child, had effectively tried to steal my life out from under me. A wave of sorrow rolled through me, tightening my throat. On the refrigerator door hung a collage of family photos under a souvenir magnet. My eyes drifted to a picture of Mark at 12 years old, grinning as he held up a fish we'd caught on a long-ago summer trip. I stood behind him in that photo, one hand on his shoulder, both of us sunburned and happy. Next to it was another picture from his college graduation, Mark in his cap and gown, beaming as he wrapped an arm around me and his mother, Linda. The sunlight in that photo made us all glow with health and promise. Linda's smile was brighter than any of ours, she'd been so proud of him that day. I swallowed hard, remembering her face. Linda had been gone for 15 years now, taken by a stroke far too young. In her last moments at the hospital, she'd gripped my hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Promise me you'll take care of our boy." I'd promised. God, how I'd promised. I had taken that oath and poured everything I had into raising Mark right, being both father and mother as best I could. Every decision since then had been guided by the thought of what Linda would want for our son. Now I wondered what she would say if she could see this moment. Her husband, now a 61-year-old man with graying hair and a tired heart, standing alone in a quiet house after signing away his finances to the son we raised with such love. Would she be furious? Heartbroken? Or would she pinch my ear the way she used to when I messed up, and tell me I should have seen this coming? My gaze fell to another item on the fridge, a crayon drawing from 5-year-old little Emma, my granddaughter. She'd drawn Grandpa Frank and her stick figure self holding hands under a crooked rainbow. I'd nearly forgotten it was there. Emma gave it to me 8 months ago, after a weekend I babysat her and her baby brother Tommy. In the picture, Grandpa was smiling. As I traced the uneven crayon lines of the rainbow, a pang of loss hit me. If Mark and Vanessa were willing to cut me out now that they thought they had my money, would I even get to keep seeing Emma and Tommy? The thought that I might lose those sweet little faces, that innocent love, was almost enough to make me second-guess everything. Almost. I closed my eyes and took a long, slow breath, just as I'd learned to do back when stress at the factory threatened to give me high blood pressure. In for 5, out for 5. Calm the heart, clear the mind. When I opened my eyes, they landed on the answering machine beside the phone. The little red light blinked, indicating a saved voicemail. I knew exactly what it was, a message from my attorney's office confirming my last estate planning appointment, months ago. Suddenly, Linda's voice echoed in my mind, born of memory and longing. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for, Frank. Trust your instincts. She used to say that when I doubted a business decision or fretted over Mark's teenage antics. And she was right. My instincts had been screaming at me for weeks now, ever since Mark started dropping hints about consolidating accounts and simplifying my estate for my convenience. I hadn't wanted to believe ill of my own son, so I played the forgetful old man, deflecting with jokes or changing the subject. But I'd quietly started preparing, just in case. Now, just in case, had arrived. In spades. I peeled the family photos off the fridge door gently and set them on the table, away from the ink that now bled through the top page of my notepad. I didn't want anger to taint those memories. They belonged to a different time, a better chapter of our family story. I folded the graduation photo and slipped it into my shirt pocket, close to my heart, as if drawing some last strength from it. Then I clicked the pen again and turned to a fresh page on the pad. There were things to do, and I would need to be meticulous. Mark and Vanessa thought they held all the cards, but I still had a few moves left to play. First, I needed to make a phone call. Actually, several. I sat down and reached for the phone, but before dialing, I hesitated. A memory surfaced, unbidden and vivid. The summer sun beat down on our backyard, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and charcoal. I was crouched next to 6-year-old Mark, showing him how to hold the base of a model rocket we'd built from a kit. His eyes were huge with excitement and a little fear. "Are you ready?" I asked, smiling at the freckled face that looked up at me. He bit his lip and nodded. "Ready." "Okay. 3, 2, 1, launch." We pressed the ignition and the small rocket whooshed up into the sky, leaving a trail of smoke. Mark jumped up, cheering and clapping. I laughed, feeling a swell of pride at his pure joy. When the parachute deployed and the rocket drifted back down, he chased it across the yard, stumbling in his untied sneakers. He brought it back to me with a triumphant grin. "We did it, Dad." I ruffled his hair. "We sure did, sport. Team Franklin wins again." He threw his little arms around my neck with such force that I fell back sitting on the grass. We both burst out laughing. Linda snapped a photo just at that moment, me in a rare defeat on the lawn, Mark hugging me like I was his entire world. In that second, I remember thinking that nothing could ever break the bond we had. We were a team. That boy trusted me with every fiber of his being, and I trusted him just the same. My eyes stung as the memory faded. I brushed a hand over my face and realized it was wet. I'd been so lost in the past I hadn't noticed the tears. It took a moment to gather myself. The betrayal was so much sharper in contrast to the sweetness of that recollection. How did we get from there to here? I wondered again, not for the last time. When did my son decide that money mattered more than family, more than integrity? I drew a deep breath and squared my shoulders. That was a question to be answered another day, perhaps. Right now, I had work to do. The same way I once guided that little boy's hands to launch a rocket, I was now going to guide my own plan to launch, and make sure it landed exactly where it needed to. I reached for the phone once more and dialed a familiar number. "Good afternoon, Halverson and Associates," a polite voice answered. "How may I direct your call?" "Hi, this is Frank Whitaker. I need to speak with Jacob Halverson. It's urgent." My voice was steady, businesslike. "One moment, please." There was a click and a brief silence before a warm baritone came on the line. "Frank. Jacob here. What can I do for you?" Jacob Halverson had been my attorney and friend for over 20 years. We coached Little League together when Mark was in middle school. He also helped me set up my will and a living trust shortly after Linda died, the very documents Mark likely never knew existed. I allowed myself a tight smile. "Jacob, I've had a development. I need to update you on some changes and possibly revoke a power of attorney I just signed." Jacob was silent for half a beat, long enough for a less experienced man to show surprise, but he quickly resumed a neutral tone. "I see. Why don't you fill me in?" I walked him through the broad strokes, how Mark had come by with documents, yes, it was indeed a general power of attorney he'd convinced me to sign, and how I had only pretended to go along. Jacob didn't interrupt, but I heard a low, concerned breath when I confirmed it was all my son's doing. He knew our family. He knew how proud I'd always been of Mark. By the time I finished, my friend's voice had a new steel in it. "Frank, are you safe right now? Do you believe there's any immediate risk, financially or otherwise?" "For now, I'm fine." He left thinking everything is normal. I doubt he'll try to empty accounts this instant. But I don't intend to sit around and find out. I was already flipping open the binder where I kept my financial statements. I want to move on this before they attempt anything. "Can we revoke the POA immediately?" "Yes. We can prepare a revocation document and send notice to any institutions involved. We'll need to inform your bank and anyone else that might rely on that power of attorney." Jacob paused. "I'll have the papers ready by tomorrow morning. We should also consider changing account passwords, maybe moving funds into the trust account we set up in case they try something overnight." I was thinking the same. I had online banking, though I rarely used it. I preferred paper and pen, but thankfully I wasn't completely in the technophobic old man stage. "I'll transfer what I can tonight." "And Jacob," I hesitated, swallowing the lump of emotion that threatened to choke me for a moment. "Thank you. I'm sorry to dump this on you. I never thought I'd." He cut me off gently. "Frank, you know I've got your back. Always. Let's get through the logistics first. We can talk about the rest over a drink another time." I managed a small chuckle. "I'll hold you to that." After hanging up, I carefully wrote down a checklist: revoke POA, Jacob, transfer funds, secure valuables, document everything. The act of writing the tasks calmed me further. It was a plan. A battle plan, almost, reminiscent of the project plans I'd made as a plant manager in my career days. When faced with a crisis, step one was always to stabilize the situation. The situation would be stabilized when Mark and Vanessa no longer had any actual access to my assets. I opened my laptop, a few years old but still functional, and navigated to my bank's website. As the login page loaded, another memory tugged at me, one I'd been trying to ignore: the last year or so of interactions with my son. So many small red flags I'd explained away. It was a Sunday afternoon, the end of a pleasant family dinner at my house. I was washing dishes, and Mark had wandered into my little study. I found him standing by my desk, thumbing through a thick binder I kept there. He jumped slightly when I appeared in the doorway. "Oh, hey Dad. I was just looking for a notepad," he lied, holding up the binder. It was labeled Financial, 2020 onward. I dried my hands. "You could have asked me. Need to take some notes." He shrugged and set the binder down. "Actually, I was just curious how you're doing these days. With money and all. You never really say." I remember frowning, taken aback. "I'm doing fine, son. Why do you ask?" He gave me a sheepish smile. "I worry about you, you know. Managing all this by yourself. Ever think about letting me help out? Like with online banking or paying bills? It could give you more free time." I laughed lightly, a little touched but also amused. "I may be getting on, but I can still pay a phone bill, Mark." He laughed too, but there was tension in it. "Of course. I just mean, you know, some folks our age have their kids help. For convenience." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I appreciate it. Truly. If I need help, you'll be the first to know." That seemed to settle it then. But a week later, Vanessa called me and casually brought up the same idea, how I should be enjoying life instead of poring over checkbooks, how Mark was so good with spreadsheets and wouldn't it be nice to take a back seat. I politely declined again, but that was when the nagging worry truly took root. It was as if they were reading from the same script, trying to wear me down with kindness. My bank account overview popped onto the screen with a ding, yanking me from the reverie. I focused on the numbers and options in front of me. I had 3 accounts listed, a personal checking, a savings account, and a joint account that Linda and I had opened decades ago and that I never quite closed after her passing. That joint account was essentially empty and dormant. I kept it as a sentimental relic more than anything. Today, it would serve a new purpose. Quickly, I began moving money. I transferred the bulk of my checking and savings into the old joint account, which was only in my name now but not the one Mark was aware of. To be safe, I also scheduled a wire of a significant portion out to an investment fund held under my living trust, an account Mark had no idea existed. Within 15 minutes, I had effectively drained the accounts that my son might try to access into places he couldn't touch. The numbers on the screen reassured me that if he attempted any funny business, he'd find little or nothing there. Next, I logged into the online portal for my brokerage. Years ago, I'd set up a modest investment portfolio, mainly to earn a bit more for retirement. Not a fortune, but enough that I didn't want them getting ideas. I initiated a transfer of those assets into a new subtrust account that required only my authorization. The beauty of having a well-crafted estate plan was that there were contingencies on top of contingencies. I doubted Mark even knew the half of what I owned. He likely assumed my checking and our house were everything. He was in for a surprise. After an hour of meticulous work, I sat back and rubbed my eyes. The sun had set, and the kitchen was illuminated by the harsh blue glow of the laptop screen and the soft amber from the hood light over the stove. Outside, the January early evening darkness pressed against the window. In the silence, I could hear my own heartbeat, slower now, steady. The anger had not left, it simmered quietly, fueling my focus, but I no longer felt like I might explode. I felt in control. I stood and stretched, then went around the house securing a few physical items. The deed to this house, for instance, was still in my name and stored in a fireproof box in my bedroom closet. I unlocked the box and checked that it was there along with my late wife's jewelry and important documents. I smiled grimly at the irony. Among those documents was the paperwork from when I had helped Mark buy his home, a home now at risk if I pulled the plug I had inserted years ago. Tucked in that same box was a folded paper that I hadn't looked at in ages. I pulled it out and realized it was the letter Linda had written to Mark on the day he left for college. I had forgotten that I saved it. Her handwriting was neat and looping, the blue ink faded slightly. As I unfolded it carefully, a small Polaroid slipped out and fluttered to the floor. I bent to retrieve it, squinting in the dim light. It was a photo of Mark at 18, standing in front of the old station wagon we gave him to drive to campus, his arm around Linda and me. We looked so hopeful. I had my entire life ahead of me, it seemed, and he did too. We both had so many dreams for him. I put the photo back and refolded the letter without reading it. I knew it would be full of her gentle advice and love. I wasn't ready to confront those sentiments now. They'd soften me, and I needed to remain resolved. Locking the box again, I caught a glimpse of myself in the dresser mirror. A tall, gray-haired man with worry lines and steady dark eyes gazed back. "They think you're weak," I told my reflection quietly. "They think you're a fool." The man in the mirror pressed his lips together in a hard line. Then I allowed a small smile. "We'll show them otherwise, won't we?" It was an old trick I used when preparing for a difficult negotiation back in my manufacturing days, talking to the mirror, rehearsing the points. This time, though, I felt almost as if I were giving that pep talk to someone else entirely, the new version of me that had been born when I signed those papers. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of minor tasks. I double-checked the balances. My accessible accounts now showed a few $100s at most, which I left so as not to arouse immediate suspicion. I typed up a detailed list of every transfer and change I made, then printed it and placed it in my safe as evidence, should I need to prove what was moved when. I found myself wondering if it would come to a legal fight. Maybe. But I suspected once I pulled the rug out, Mark and Vanessa would scramble to salvage their own situation more than pursue me in court. Their arrogance had made them sloppy. They hadn't even involved a lawyer of their own when getting my signature, probably to avoid any scrutiny. That would work in my favor if things got ugly. Before turning in that night, I decided on one more bit of preparation. I fetched an old digital recorder from my study, a relic from when I interviewed my own father about our family history years ago. If Mark or Vanessa called me or came by in the coming days, I wanted a record of everything said. I tested it, replacing the batteries and slipping it into my shirt pocket. It was small enough to not notice unless you were looking. Satisfied, I finally went to bed. Sleep did not come easily. I lay in the dark for hours, thoughts churning despite my efforts to quiet them. Scenes of the past played against the black backdrop of my mind, Mark blowing out candles on his 10th birthday, cheeks smeared with chocolate frosting as he grinned at me, Mark at 16, furious when I grounded him for crashing his bike, shouting that I was ruining his life, Mark on his wedding day, eyes full of tears when I toasted to his future with Vanessa and their future children. We'd both cried that day, happy and hopeful. How naive I had been. How blindly I'd trusted that our bond was unbreakable. Sometime after midnight, I drifted into a shallow sleep. I dreamed of Linda. In the dream, we were young, dancing in our first house's living room, an old record playing Sam Cooke. She was laughing about something, and I was twirling her, and little Mark tugged on my pant leg because he wanted to dance too. I picked him up and the three of us waltzed in a clumsy circle, all laughter and love. I woke with tears on my face yet again, my chest aching. I'm doing this for us, I thought, as if she could hear. He has to learn what he's done. He has to understand the damage. Morning light crept around the edges of the curtains. I got up, got dressed, and brewed a pot of strong coffee. I felt surprisingly clear-headed. The plan was in motion, most urgent things were done, and I had support coming. At 9 a.m. sharp I was at Jacob's office downtown. We signed the revocation of power of attorney, notarized and official. Copies would be sent to the relevant parties, including Mark, though he wouldn't receive his copy until at least the next day by mail. If he attempted to use the POA at a bank today, they'd also be notified it was revoked. Jacob and I discussed the broader situation in low tones as we walked out of the building into the cold January wind. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and admiration. "Are you sure you want to go about it this way, Frank? Once they realize what's happened, it'll be war." I clenched and unclenched my fists in my coat pockets. "They started this war," I replied quietly. "I'm just going to finish it." He nodded, and we parted with an agreement that I'd call if anything escalated. Over the next week, I lived my life almost as normal, all while hiding my preparation beneath a veneer of routine. I still met my buddies at the diner for coffee on Thursday. I still went to the community center for my weekly pool game. If you looked at me, I was just a semi-retired old guy going about his business. But inside, I was watching and waiting. Waiting for them to make the next move. It didn't take long. For days after I'd signed the papers, before the mailed revocation likely reached Mark, he called me in the evening. I could hear background noise of a television and clinking glasses. It sounded like he was at home, maybe having a relaxing night. "Hey Dad," he said, an easy warmth in his tone that set my teeth on edge. This was the son I knew, or rather, the act of the son I knew. "Just checking in. How are you feeling this week? Must be a load off, not worrying about all those bills, huh?" I had placed the call on speaker and discreetly hit the record button in my pocket just in case. "Oh, I'm all right," I answered, matching his casual tone. "It's a bit strange, honestly, not doing my banking. Old habits, you know. I was about to pay the electric bill yesterday and then I remembered you're handling it." I could picture the smile on his face as he spoke. "That's right. You deserve to relax. We got it under control." Actually, he trailed off as if hesitant. I waited. "Yes. Well, since you brought up the electric bill, I was going to ask if you could write a check to me for some of the larger upcoming expenses, just until we get access to everything electronically. Transferring utilities and such can take a cycle or two." Ah, there it was. Already trying to get money directly. My stomach turned, but I laughed lightly. "Oh, you need a check. What for, son?" He cleared his throat. "Just a cushion for some things. Property tax is due soon, and we want to make sure it's covered so you don't worry. And the insurance premiums on your house and car, those will come up before we've switched addresses. I'd cover it myself, but we're a little tight this month with the kids' preschool tuition and all." I closed my eyes. A lie sprinkled with truth. Yes, the taxes and insurance were due next month, but this wasn't about paying those on my behalf. More likely, he wanted to funnel money to his own accounts as fast as possible. Tight this month. They lived in a custom-built 5-bedroom home in an upscale development. If they were tight, it was because of their lifestyle, not because of preschool costs. Still, I played along. "I see. How much do you need, Mark?" He hesitated, maybe surprised I didn't protest. "If you could spare, say, $10,000. I know that sounds like a lot, but I figure a few months of expenses covered up front, then later we can settle up once everything's consolidated." My hand tightened around the phone. $10,000. He asked it so casually, like it was pocket change I might have lying around. Once upon a time, 10,000 was nearly what I made in a full year at my first job. And here was my son, asking for it with the smooth entitlement of someone who had never truly worried about money, because I had ensured he never had to. "Okay," I said after a long moment. "We'll arrange that." I could almost feel his surprise through the phone. "Really? Oh, great. Do you want me to come by and pick up a check?" "No need. I'll stop by your place tomorrow," I said. "We can have lunch and I'll bring the check. How's that?" It was risky offer, inviting myself over. But I wanted to see their faces. I needed to see them up close, to remind myself why I was doing this, and perhaps to gather more evidence of what they were up to. Besides, part of me still hoped, foolishly, that I might detect some hint of remorse or conflict in my son, something that said this isn't really who I am, Dad. Mark readily agreed. "Sure, Dad. That sounds good. Vanessa can make something, or we'll order in from that deli you like." We set a time for noon. The next day, I prepared carefully. I wrote out a check for $10,000 from my nearly empty checking account, knowing full well it would bounce if they tried to cash it now that I had moved the funds. Instead of voiding it, I left it active. Another part of me wanted to see what they would do with it. I tucked the checkbook in my inner jacket pocket. I also slid the little voice recorder back into my pocket. Charged my phone fully so I could record on that too if needed. Then I grabbed one more item, a slim file folder containing copies of some key documents, my trust paperwork showing I owned their house's deed, copies of the mortgage payments I'd made, even a copy of the power of attorney revocation. I wasn't sure if I'd use these today, but having them felt like going into battle with weapons at the ready. The drive to Mark's house took about 20 minutes. They lived in a well-to-do suburban neighborhood, the kind with large lawns and bigger egos. I passed through the gates, the security guard recognized my truck and waved me in, a familiarity likely born of all the times I had visited or dropped things off for them. As I navigated the winding streets lined with oak trees and tasteful holiday wreaths still lingering on doors, I thought about the first time I saw this place. It was 7 years ago. Mark and Vanessa were in their late 20s, two young professionals with big dreams but modest incomes. He was a junior manager at his company, she worked part-time at an interior design firm, trying to start her own business on the side. They found this new development and fell in love with a 2-story craftsman on a corner lot, far out of their price range. I remember Vanessa's voice on the phone, honey sweet as she extolled the great school district for the kids they planned to have, the safe streets, the community pool. I remember Mark being more hesitant to ask me for help, but eventually he did. And I had given them everything. I took out a home equity loan on my own smaller house to help with their down payment and co-signed the mortgage so they'd get approved. I thought I was investing in my son's future, in my grandchildren's future. And to be fair, it had given them a beautiful life, until now. I turned onto Maple Circle, their street, and saw the house come into view. It looked postcard perfect as always, gray-blue siding, a wraparound porch, 2 expensive SUVs in the driveway, one of which I knew was technically leased under my name, though they paid the monthly. Planters on the porch brimmed with winter pansies that added a pop of color. Vanessa's doing, no doubt. I parked and sat for a moment, gathering myself. The scene of domestic tranquility almost made me forget why I was here. It felt like any other casual visit. But then I noticed something that made me clench my jaw. Through the front window, I saw an unfamiliar older couple sitting in the living room. They were well dressed, the man had silver hair and wore a blazer, the woman in a stylish blouse. I recognized them after a moment's thought, Cody and Elaine, or Eileen. No, Elaine was wrong, her name was Elizabeth. That's right, Cody and Elizabeth Jennings, Vanessa's parents. My heart gave a painful thump of anger. Mark hadn't mentioned they would be here. In fact, he had framed this as a normal lunch with just him and Vanessa. Were they in on this meeting? Did they know about the financial takeover? My guess was likely yes, or at least that their daughter had confided in them. Cody Jennings was a retired investment banker, and from our limited interactions, I'd found him polite but condescending. If Vanessa told him I'd handed control to them, he was probably crowing that it was about time. I inhaled slowly, trying to quell the flush rising in my cheeks. Keep cool, I reminded myself. Gather information. If they wanted to involve her highbrow parents in this, I'd use it to my advantage somehow. I got out of the truck and walked up the drive. Before I reached the door, it opened. Vanessa stood there, a too bright smile plastered on. Frank. Come on in. She even gave me a light hug as I stepped into the foyer, which surprised me. It was like she was suddenly my best friend. We're so happy you could make it for lunch. I hung my coat and deliberately patted my chest as if checking something, making sure the recorder was positioned well. It was on, the red light hidden by fabric. Of course. Thanks for having me, I replied. As I followed her into the living room, my son appeared, carrying a tray of drinks. Dad. Good to see you. He sounded cheerful, but there was a tightness around his eyes. Whether it was guilt or worry I couldn't tell. Cody and Elizabeth rose from the sofa. "Frank, hello," Elizabeth greeted me, stepping forward to kiss my cheek like we were old friends. She wore a strong perfume that smelled like money and country clubs. Cody shook my hand firmly. I forced a cordial smile. "Mr. and Mrs. Jennings. I wasn't expecting to see you." "Oh, we popped by for a visit and Vanessa insisted we stay for lunch," Elizabeth trilled. "I hope you don't mind." The glint in her eye told me she knew exactly that I hadn't been told. "Not at all," I lied easily. "Always a pleasure." We all sat. Mark handed me a glass of iced tea. I noticed he had a whiskey on the rocks, as did Cody. Middle of the day and already drinking, maybe a bit of liquid courage for what they intended to happen next. Vanessa had a sparkling water, Elizabeth a gin and tonic from the looks of it. For a few minutes, the conversation was benign. Elizabeth asked after my health and mentioned a mutual acquaintance who had passed recently. Cody made small talk about the weather and some local development project. I responded politely, but my mind was elsewhere, scanning for the angle. I felt like I was sitting at a table of poker players, all of us holding cards close. I didn't have to wait long. As we started on the light lunch, quiche and salad, which Vanessa served with performative flourish, the true reason for their presence bubbled up. "So Frank," Cody said, swirling his drink, "I hear you're letting the younger generation handle some of your affairs. Smart move, if I do say so. Time to enjoy the golden years without stress." There it was. I dabbed my mouth with a napkin, pretending to consider his words thoughtfully. "Well, I do trust my son," I said. Across the table, Mark gave a faint smile at that. Trust, what a loaded word between us now. And I suppose he and Vanessa have things well in hand. I nearly choked on calling her by name so casually, but I managed. "Of course we do," Vanessa jumped in. "We're more than happy to take some responsibilities off your plate." Elizabeth set down her fork, tilting her head sympathetically. "It's wonderful what you're doing for them, Frank. For the family. Many parents our age cling to control and make it difficult for their children to step in." She flashed a patronizing smile. "I'm glad to see you're not letting pride get in the way of practicality." I smiled back, equally thin-lipped. Pride, no. Responsibility, now that's something I can't easily shrug off. Mark gave me a curious look at my tone, but I drank my tea calmly. Cody chuckled. "You've earned a rest. Let the kids manage the grind. I always say, by the time you hit 60, you should be sitting back and collecting the checks, not writing them." His wife laughed lightly. "Oh Cody, you'd have retired at 50 if you could have." He grinned. "Guilty. But in all seriousness, Frank, if there's anything you need advice on during this transition, I'd be happy to help. Estate planning, investments, that sort of thing, I did it for 35 years. Ah, so that was it. He wasn't just here to applaud his daughter, he wanted to poke around in my affairs too, perhaps ensure his daughter and son-in-law maximized their haul. Suddenly I realized this might be more orchestrated than I thought. Was this a subtle attempt at getting me to divulge more of my asset details? Or to intimidate me into compliance by sheer pressure of groupthink? I felt a spark of defiance. They really thought I was completely out of my depth. An old fool sitting at the table while the adults talked over his head. I gave Cody a nod. "That's very kind. Though I do have my own lawyer, and things are mostly squared away. But I'll keep that in mind." We moved through lunch with that undercurrent ever present. I occasionally caught Vanessa eyeing me when she thought I wasn't looking, like she was assessing how pliable I was being. Mark seemed content to let his in-laws steer the conversation, as if they were validating his decision to take charge. Finally, as Elizabeth was slicing another piece of quiche, Mark cleared his throat. "Dad, did you happen to bring that check we talked about?" He tried to sound offhand, but I could hear the slight tremor of anticipation. The moment of truth for him. I set down my glass. I did. I reached inside my jacket and pulled out my checkbook. Four pairs of eyes watched as I opened it. I could almost feel them holding their breath. Slowly, I slid out the check I'd pre-written, letting them see the amount. 10,000, as requested, I said, handing it to Mark. His face betrayed a flash of surprise. I'm not sure if it was the relief that I'd actually done it, or if some part of him doubted I even had that much readily available. But he took it quickly and folded it into his pocket. Thanks. This will just cover those few things we mentioned. Vanessa beamed. Thank you, Frank. We promise, we'll keep everything running smoothly. I gave a mild shrug. I certainly hope so. I'd hate to think of what might happen if things didn't run smoothly. A silence settled just for a second. Cody looked between us, sensing an undercurrent. He raised his whiskey. To smooth sailing, then, he said, attempting levity. I raised my tea, eyes on my son. To smooth sailing. We clinked glasses. Inside, I was churning. Part of me wanted to upend the table and demand to know how they could do this to me. Wanted to yell, how dare you? After all I sacrificed. But I kept my composure. Not yet. After lunch, Mark and Vanessa walked her parents out to their car, leaving me momentarily alone in the foyer. I took the chance to step into Mark's home office, just off the hall. I'd been inside it many times before. It's where he often bragged about stock picks or showed me his latest gadget. It was empty now, but on the desk I saw a stack of documents. I normally wouldn't snoop, no, correction, old me wouldn't snoop, but I felt no hesitation now. I flipped through quickly. What I saw made my blood run cold, a printed list of my assets that I recognized from a summary page in my estate binder, accounts, approximate balances, property info. It wasn't complete or entirely up to date, but it was definitely from my records. Likely Mark had copied it when he was looking for a notepad in my study that Sunday. I also saw a draft of something titled Petition for Guardianship, with some notes scribbled on it. Guardianship? They were even exploring declaring me incompetent if I hadn't agreed willingly. My hands shook with rage for a moment as I realized the extent of their scheme. They truly had planned for every route, to either coax me into handing over power, or possibly force it legally by questioning my mental fitness. The audacity and cruelty of it took my breath away. I carefully took out my phone and snapped photos of these documents. Evidence, if needed, of their intentions. Then I heard footsteps and quickly stepped back into the foyer just as the front door opened and Mark and Vanessa returned from seeing off her folks. Vanessa looked surprised to see me just standing there. Dad, you okay? I smiled benignly. Oh yes. Fine. I was just admiring the painting here. I gestured to a landscape on the wall. It was nonsense, of course, but they didn't press. Well, thanks for coming by, Mark said, perhaps sensing I was about to leave. He sounded cheerful, and I realized he probably thought today had been a resounding success. He got the check, I played nice, her parents reinforced the narrative that this was normal and good. I put on my coat. Thank you for lunch. It was nice to catch up. My voice was neutral. Vanessa gave me one of her pageant smiles. We should do this more often. Maybe once everything is settled, we can have you over for dinner with the kids. They'd love to see their grandpa. The casual mention of my grandkids stung. Using them as a carrot now, were they? As if taking everything from me and then granting me occasional access to Emma and Tommy was supposed to keep me compliant. That would be lovely, I replied, lying through my teeth. With that, we exchanged goodbyes. Mark walked me out to the porch. As I started down the steps, he called after me softly, "Love you, Dad." I paused and looked back. He hadn't said that in a while. It was the one thing that almost cracked my armor. For a second, I saw a flash of the boy who used to say those words every night at bedtime, the boy in the rocket ship pajamas clutching his stuffed dog. My throat tightened painfully. Take care, son," I managed, and turned away before he could see the conflict on my face. I drove off. In the rearview mirror, I caught him standing there, hands in pockets, watching me go. It struck me that he didn't look triumphant or smug in that moment. He just looked lost. Like maybe deep down, some part of him understood that a line had been crossed and there was no going back easily. But he made no move to stop me or undo it. By the time I got home, resolve had hardened in me like cement. Seeing those printed documents, the potential guardianship petition, that was the final straw. They had planned to steamroll me, even if it meant declaring me crazy or incapable. There was no more room for doubt or mercy in my course of action. I immediately called Jacob to inform him of what I found. He asked if I wanted to preemptively file anything against them. I decided against it for now. No, a court battle was a last resort. I preferred a more direct kind of justice, one that they would feel immediately and undeniably. For the next 2 weeks, I worked with a focus and drive I hadn't felt in years. Through Jacob, I quietly made sure that the deed on Mark's house, technically held as collateral for the loan I took, was ready to be acted on. I was effectively the lien holder of record. If I wanted to call the loan due or initiate foreclosure for non-payment, since I had stopped the automatic payments the moment I canceled the power of attorney, something I'm sure they hadn't noticed yet because I'd paid through the end of the previous month, I could. And I would. I also contacted the auto finance company for the Mercedes SUV. I had co-signed that loan as well when they upgraded vehicles last year. My name was listed as a co-owner. After explaining my situation, without too many details, just that I was reclaiming the vehicle from an extended family use, I arranged to have the car quietly picked up when the time came. The second car, a Lexus, was fully in Vanessa's name. Nothing I could do directly about that, but I knew if I squeezed their finances, a leased luxury car would be one of the first things to go anyway. The bank accounts were already sorted, I'd see to it they couldn't touch mine, and I certainly had no access or desire to meddle with theirs directly. But I had other ways. I had quietly tipped off a friend of mine who worked at a different bank about what was going on, framing it hypothetically as concern about elder financial abuse. He suggested that if I wanted to ensure any funds Mark moved from my accounts to his could be flagged, I might report the situation to the fraud department of my bank. I held off on that for the moment, since I'd managed things on my end. Instead, I decided that simply depriving them of my money and hitting them with big expenses, like suddenly being on the hook for the mortgage and cars, would freeze them up nicely. All the while, I kept any communication with Mark and Vanessa to a minimum. They surprisingly didn't contact me much either. Perhaps they were waiting for the official POA confirmation or just happily busy spending what they thought was soon to be theirs. I did get a cheerful text from Mark a week after our lunch saying, "Everything's looking good. We'll come by soon to discuss budget stuff." I responded with a simple, "Okay, let me know." They didn't know it, but that was exactly what I was letting them do, dig themselves deeper into their fantasy while I quietly prepared reality. I imagined conversations between them. Perhaps she told him to keep me pacified, to not spook me by asking for too much too fast after the $10,000. Perhaps he, feeling a pang of guilt, suggested they give me a bit of space. It didn't matter. With each passing day, my determination only grew. I spent a lot of evenings alone with my thoughts during that time. One night, I pulled out Linda's old photo albums and paged through them slowly. There was our wedding picture, her smile incandescent and my eyes young and earnest. There was baby Mark in her arms, red-faced and screaming at the camera, while we laughed. There were countless Christmases, birthdays, ordinary moments captured by her zeal for documenting our lives. I even found a photo of Cody and Elizabeth Jennings at Mark and Vanessa's wedding, a candid shot where they stood with stiff pride, likely already judging me and my side of the family. I was in the background of that photo, holding then 2-year-old Emma, my granddaughter, and making a silly face to stop her crying while no one else was paying attention. The memory made me shake my head. 2 families had come together that day, but they were never equal. I wondered if on that day the Jennings already thought their daughter was marrying up from her own perspective, or down into mine. With a sigh, I closed the album. Linda, I murmured to the silence of my living room, I'm sorry. I tried so hard to keep my promise. I never wanted it to come to this. My voice broke a little. But I have to do it. I have to show him, both of them, what it means to truly lose everything, before they destroy what little is left of our family's love. I could almost hear her gentle voice saying, do what you must. I trust you. Perhaps it was just my own conscience finding comfort. Finally, the 3-week mark arrived, and my trap was set to spring. On a crisp Monday morning, I sat at my breakfast nook with a cup of coffee I'd brewed extra strong. The sun was shining weakly through winter clouds. According to the plan, around noon, a courier would deliver a certain notice to Mark's address. And a collections agent would be on his way to recover the Mercedes around the same time. As for their bank accounts, well, indirectly, those would feel the squeeze soon too, once the mortgage bank started its process. Right on cue, my phone buzzed at about 12:30. I answered immediately. Dad. It was Mark, and he was in a panic. I could hear Vanessa yelling in the background, and possibly a baby crying, likely Tommy, who was not quite 2 and prone to fussy afternoons. Hello, Mark, I said evenly. I had been expecting his call, but his tone was even more frantic than I imagined. What the hell did you do? He shouted, foregoing any pleasantries. It was the tone of someone who had been pushed to a breaking point. Our bank accounts, they're frozen. And some guy just took the Mercedes. Just hauled it onto a truck and took it. There's a notice that our house is in foreclosure proceedings. His words tumbled over each other. I pictured him, tie loose around his neck, hair wild, waving papers in the air. I had to bite back a satisfied smile. In a calm voice, I replied, Mark, slow down. What do you mean, what did I do? Don't play games. Vanessa's voice shrilled in the background. She must have been on speaker too. She grabbed the phone then, her tone ice-cold and venomous. We know you're behind this, you spiteful old man. You reversed everything, didn't you? Gave us that rubber check, canceled the payments. I cut in quietly. I did exactly what any responsible person in my position would do once I realized I was being conned. There was a brief silence on their end, just the sound of their heavy breathing and the distant wail of a child who sensed the household's distress. Then Mark came back on, voice cracking. How could you? We're your family. Why would you pull the money like that? You're going to make us lose the house. There was genuine despair in his words, but also a kind of incredulity, as if he truly hadn't believed I'd ever retaliate. Something in me hardened further hearing him ask how could I. I stood up, pacing slowly in my kitchen. Through the window, I saw a pair of robins land on the bare oak tree outside, oblivious to the drama playing out. No, Mark. The question is how could you? How could you and Vanessa think I wouldn't notice you trying to steal everything I spent my life building? Did you think I'd just die quietly in a corner while you squandered my money and shut me out of your lives? Did you think I was truly that gullible? You signed the power of attorney, he said weakly, as if that were justification. You said you trusted me. I wanted to see how far you would go, I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. And you went beyond anything I imagined. So yes, I undid it. All of it. Vanessa came on again, fury overriding reason. This is illegal. We'll contest it, we'll sue you for what you've done. Freezing our accounts, repossessing our car, that was my car, actually, I interjected. Co-owned by me, co-signed by me. Read your loan paperwork. Just like the house, I inhaled sharply to steady myself. The house that I paid the down payment on and paid the mortgage on for 5 years. The house that is in foreclosure now because without my money, you can't cover it. My voice dripped with a mix of anger and disappointment. If you somehow thought you owned everything, you were mistaken. You've been living on my dime for years, and you didn't even have the decency to treat me with a shred of respect. So now, you get to live with the consequences of cutting me out." I heard a muffled sob, surprisingly from Mark. When he spoke next, he sounded shattered. "Dad. Please, can we just talk? Face to face." This got out of hand. In the background, I heard Vanessa hiss, "What are you doing?" and he shushed her. "I'm sorry, okay? Is that what you want?" "We're sorry. We never meant for it to go this way. Didn't you?" I replied, quieter now. 3 weeks ago I was just an old man you thought you could dupe. Now that your plan fell apart, suddenly you want to talk." I let out a heavy sigh. Despite everything, a part of me was wrung with grief hearing my son break down. But I steeled myself. "Fine. Come over, then. We'll talk. But I suggest you leave any lawyers or other schemes at home. This is between us." "We'll be there," he said immediately. Vanessa began to protest in the background, but I hung up before the argument could reach me. I had enough to prepare myself for without hearing them bicker. I sat for a moment in the silence that followed. My hands were trembling, and I realized it was from the adrenaline. This was it, the confrontation I knew had to happen. And I had the upper hand firmly now. Still, I wasn't sure how it would go. Would they scream, cry, beg? Would I? My heart felt like a stone in my chest, heavy and sad beneath the layers of anger. Just then, the phone buzzed again, this time a text from Jacob, "Notice of foreclosure delivered and filed. Let me know if you need anything else. Stay safe." I appreciated the concern hidden in those words. Stay safe. Did he think my son might actually harm me? I shook my head. No, I didn't believe that, not physically at least. But emotional harm, well, that was already done. I responded briefly to confirm I was fine, then set the phone aside. There were maybe 15 minutes before they would drive here in a frenzy. I decided to wait on the porch, a calculated gesture to show I wasn't afraid and also to avoid giving them the power of storming into my home. On my porch, it would be my territory under the open sky. I shrugged on my coat and stepped outside. The chilly air helped clear the last fuzziness from my mind. Sure enough, barely 10 minutes later, I saw their Lexus tearing around the corner into my street, moving far faster than was legal in our neighborhood. They screeched to a halt in front of my house. Both doors flew open. Mark came out first, face flushed, hair disheveled as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. Vanessa emerged a second later, fury radiating from her stiff posture and the snap of her heels on the pavement. She actually pointed a finger at me from across my front yard like some avenging angel, and for a bizarre second I thought she might charge at me. They marched up the walkway. I held up a hand calmly. "That's far enough," I said, standing at the top of the porch steps. The slight elevation gave me a rare physical advantage over my taller son. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, looking up at me with eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Dad, why?" was all he managed to say, voice cracking. That single plaintive word almost undid me. Why? How could I distill all the why into a single answer? Meanwhile, Vanessa did not hesitate. She grabbed the railing as if to come up and I leveled a stare at her. "Do not step onto my porch unless you're invited, Vanessa." She recoiled, eyes narrowing. "Your porch? How about our lives, Frank? You had no right, that set me off." "No right?" My voice rang out louder than I intended. I had every right. Every legal and moral right to take back what's mine. And frankly, to teach you both a lesson, if that's even possible at this point. Mark reached out and touched his wife's arm, trying to calm her, but she shook him off and continued, "You tricked us. You played us along like some kind of game." I barked a mirthless laugh. "You're accusing me of trickery? That's rich. Coming from the people who were plotting to put me in a guardianship or bleed me dry quietly, whichever came first. I saw from their faces that they were shocked I knew about that. I pressed on. Yes, I found those papers in your office. I know you documented all my assets, looking for every penny. Nothing was enough for you. I could have given you the world and you'd have taken that too and asked for more. That's not true, Mark said, tears in his eyes. Dad, I never wanted. We thought it would be easier if we handled things. You seemed so lonely and maybe not keeping up with everything. His words stumbled over themselves. And yes, the money would help with some things, we're struggling, okay? The house, the cars, the kids' expenses. We thought since you weren't using a lot of it, why not redirect it to yourselves? I finished for him, voice cold. You should have asked. You should have come to me like a son, honestly, if you were in trouble. I would have helped, as I always have. Instead, you concocted this plan behind my back, treating me like an obstacle or an old fool to be managed. Vanessa folded her arms. Would you have helped, though? Really? The last time we asked for money, like the down payment, you gave it, but then you held it over us. Maybe we were tired of feeling like we owe you our lives. Her tone was biting, but I heard the tremor beneath it. I stared at her in disbelief. Held it over you? When did I ever ask for anything in return? I paid that money without hesitation. I never once asked for a cent back. All I ever asked was to be treated like family, to be allowed to be part of your lives, to see my grandkids, to spend holidays together. If my presence at Christmas or Sunday dinners feels like a debt to you, that says more about you than me. She faltered, looking momentarily unsure. Then her simmering anger returned. This isn't about that. It's about what's happening right now. We could lose everything because of what you did. The bank froze our checking account, we can't even buy groceries today. The foreclosure notice is taped to our door for the whole neighborhood to see. The embarrassment, it struck me then. She was listing inconveniences and embarrassment, but not once did she express remorse for what they attempted. It was all about what I did in response. Mark at least looked deeply ashamed. He had sunk to sit on the step, head in his hands. I decided to focus on him, maybe there was hope there. Son, I said, softening my voice but keeping it firm, look at me. He lifted his head, and the broken expression on his face made my chest ache. You have put me through hell these past few weeks, no, even longer, if I count the slow distancing, the excuses, the way you let her family belittle me subtly and not so subtly while you stood by. I've been mourning our relationship, Mark. Mourning it like a death, because that's what it felt like when you betrayed me. My voice cracked despite my resolve, and I saw him flinch. Good. He needed to know the pain he'd caused. I never meant to betray you, he whispered. I thought. I convinced myself it was just finances, it wasn't personal. That I could make it up to you by taking care of you with your own money, I guess. It sounds so horrible when I say it out loud. I was stupid. I was wrong. Yes, you were, I agreed, not letting him off the hook. You were wrong to the point that I wondered if I raised you at all, because the man who did this seemed like a stranger to me. My son would never, or so I thought. He winced like I'd slapped him. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Oh please, enough with the guilt trip. Yes, he made a mistake. We both did. But we only did what we thought was necessary. You were going to blow through your savings or get scammed by someone else eventually. At least with us, it stays in the family. She was clinging to her justification with iron talons. I shook my head slowly. You still don't see anything wrong with what you did, do you? She threw her hands up. Fine, it was extreme. I'll admit that. We shouldn't have gone behind your back. But honestly, Frank, you've been so stubbornly independent. We offered help before, and you brushed it off. You hold on to everything so tightly, because I couldn't trust you, I said sharply, cutting through her rationalizations. And you proved me right. If I had handed everything to you nicely, do you think you'd be standing here? Or would you have found a reason to keep me at arm's length except when you needed more money? Ask yourself that. For once, she had no quick retort. Her face twitched, and she looked away toward the street, blinking rapidly. Perhaps the first hint of shame or realization crossing her mind. I took advantage of the silence. The accounts are frozen because I reported fraudulent activity to the bank. I lied slightly. Technically I just moved my money, but the result was the same. They'll stay frozen until the bank completes an investigation. The car is repossessed because I am the legal owner and I said I wanted it back. The house, I sighed. The house will officially foreclose in a few weeks if no payment is made. Consider this a forewarning. You either find a way to pay your own mortgage going forward, or you prepare to move out. I'm done paying for people who consider me a burden. Mark's eyes widened. Dad, you wouldn't. Where will we live? With 2 kids, you should have thought of that, I said, feeling a stab of pity that I quickly pushed down. You're 34, not 5. You have a good job, Vanessa has her work. Maybe you'll have to downsize, maybe you'll have to sell off the luxuries and live within your means like I warned you long ago. I couldn't resist adding, perhaps if you spent less on luxury cars and more on things that actually matter, you wouldn't be one missed payment away from disaster. He bowed his head, tears dripping onto the concrete. We were trying to keep up, with her parents, with the neighborhood. And I know that's not an excuse. I know. He looked up at me, eyes pleading. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I've been a terrible son. I let you down in every way. If Mom were alive, she'd hate me for what I've done to you. He choked on a sob. I hate myself for it. Those words, the raw remorse in his voice, cracked the ice around my heart just a little. I had expected anger and excuses, and I got plenty of that from Vanessa. But hearing my son, my only child, essentially broken and apologizing, it pulled at the deepest part of me. I stepped down off the porch at last and stood in front of him. He stared up at me, looking years younger in his anguish, like the little boy who used to scrape his knee and cry for me. I put a hand on his shoulder. What you did was very wrong, I said, voice low. It hurt me more than anything else ever has, including losing your mother. Because this felt like losing you. I need you to understand that. He nodded frantically. I do. I do, Dad. I understand, I swear. Please. Please don't cut me off completely. Don't let this be the end of us. Vanessa watched this exchange, biting her lip. Her eyes were glassy now, tears of frustration or genuine emotion, I couldn't be sure. She wasn't used to not being in control, that was clear. I drew a long breath. I'm not going to pretend this is something we can just hug out and forget. Trust has been shattered. It may never fully heal. But. I squeezed his shoulder, you are my son. That will never change. I loved you when you were that little boy launching rockets with me, and I find that I still love you now, even after everything, though I sure don't like you at the moment. A tiny, tentative hope lit in his eyes. I love you, Dad. I never stopped. I was stupid and selfish and listened to bad advice. He glanced at Vanessa. She bristled, voice cracking, don't put this all on me, Mark. I never forced you, quiet, I said, but not angrily. She fell silent, wiping her cheek. I addressed them both. This was a joint effort. I'm not interested in who led whom. In my eyes, you're both equally responsible. And both of you have to face the consequences together. If that breaks your marriage, that's not my doing, that will be on you two to sort out. I won't interfere. They exchanged a troubled look that told me this ordeal had indeed put a strain on them. So be it. They chose this path. What I need to know now, I continued, is whether you two are prepared to truly change, to take a hard look at yourselves and fix what's broken. Because I am willing to give a sliver of a chance, one chance, to reconcile. But only if I see real effort and remorse. Yes, Mark said immediately, grabbing my hand in both of his. Anything. I'll do anything to make this right, Dad. I'll go to counseling, I'll sign anything reversing control, I'll stand up to anyone. He glanced at his wife again. I won't let anyone come between us again. Vanessa's face reddened. She started, so I'm anyone now. Your father says jump and suddenly, stop. I held up my palm to her, exhausted by her defensiveness. Vanessa, I'd advise you to think very carefully about what's at stake for you. If you love my son and your children, you'll want to fix this as well. If you're only worried about appearances and money, then you're free to leave. But know this, if you stay, the entitlement stops here. You will not see another dime from me in your hand. If I decide to help at all going forward, it will be for my grandchildren's welfare, directly for them, like their education or healthcare, not to fund your lifestyle. I won't be manipulated again. Understood? She stared at me, and I saw her jaw working. Finally, after a long silence, she gave a small nod. Understood, she said quietly. There was something in her voice then, an undertone of defeat or realization. Perhaps seeing her husband crumble and me standing firm had finally shaken loose the arrogance. Or perhaps I'd just become a harder adversary than she calculated for. Either way, I had no sympathy to spare for her beyond what was necessary for the family unit. I looked back at Mark. I am going to make one thing very clear. I have forgiven a lot over the years, but this will take time to forgive. You and I, we have to rebuild from the ground up. And it's going to be on my terms, not yours. Yes, sir, he said, voice small. It almost amused me that now he called me, sir, like he was a reprimanded child again. But I nodded. I will consider halting the foreclosure if, and only if, I see consistent proof over the coming months that you are truly changed. That means getting your finances in order, downsizing if needed, no more extravagances. Show me you can live responsibly. Earn my respect back. I then added, earn my trust back. We will, he promised fervently. I'll be watching. I let that hang in the air. Then I stepped back onto the porch. Now, I think we all need to take some time. Emotions are high. I suggest you go back to your house and start figuring out how you're going to manage without my money, because, son, like I said, that faucet is turned off. Permanently. If you survive it and come out stronger, then we'll talk about real reconciliation. Mark stood, wiping his face with his sleeve. He looked beaten down, but also strangely relieved, likely that there was at least a path forward where I was still in his life in some form. I understand. Thank you. Thank you for not disowning me completely. I didn't reply to that, because a part of me had considered exactly that in my darkest anger. Instead, I gave a single nod. Vanessa took his arm. She looked at me, lips parted as if to speak, but then thought better of it. She simply said, "Goodbye, Frank." Not Dad, as I noticed. Perhaps that title was something that needed to be earned back too, in a way. That was fine by me. I watched them walk back to their car. Mark looked back once, and I raised my hand in a subtle wave. He tentatively waved back. Vanessa kept her eyes forward. As the Lexus pulled away, more sedately this time, I let out a breath I felt I'd been holding for weeks. My legs suddenly felt weak, and I sat on the porch step. The adrenaline crash made me aware of my pounding heart and the slight chill of the air. It was over. Not the whole saga, perhaps, but the worst of the storm had passed. I closed my eyes and offered a silent prayer, something I hadn't done in a long time. Thank you, I thought, to God or the universe or maybe to Linda. Thank you for giving me the strength to do what had to be done. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. I pulled it out, expecting maybe a follow-up text from Mark. But it was from my neighbor, Rosa, who lived 2 houses down. A simple message, thinking of you today. Sending love. She must have noticed the earlier commotion. Rosa had been a friend since before Linda died. She and her husband often invited me to their family gatherings, especially when they knew I was left out by my own. In fact, I recalled with a stab of gratitude that I'd spent last Thanksgiving with them, laughing genuinely for the first time in months. At the time, I felt guilty for enjoying someone else's family when mine was drifting. But now I saw that as a blessing. I texted back, "I'm okay. Let's have coffee soon." She responded almost immediately, "Anytime." Followed by a little heart emoji. I smiled to myself faintly. Real family, I thought, isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who actually welcome you without strings. As I stood and went back inside my house, my modest, comfortable home that might not have marble counters or Italian tile but was mine in every sense, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. There would be difficult days ahead, awkward conversations and probably relapses of old patterns to guard against. But I had done what was necessary to reclaim my life and autonomy. They thought they were stealing from an old man, but I showed them that this old man still had plenty of fight and wit left. And now, they knew who really owned everything they took for granted, financially, morally, and emotionally. Before closing the door, I glanced at the small family of robins now pecking at the dormant grass in my yard. Life goes on, I mused. Even after harsh winters, spring finds a way back. Inside, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the very spot where 3 weeks ago I had signed away my rights with a calm smile, already planning this outcome. On the surface, it looked like a battle won. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about winning or losing between me and my son. It was about finding our way back to some kind of honesty and maybe respect. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded graduation photo of Mark that I'd kept there. In it, we were both so happy, so hopeful. I pressed it flat on the table and rubbed my thumb over our faces. "Maybe we'll get there again," I whispered to the empty kitchen. "Maybe not the same, but better in a new way. We'll see." The coffee warmed me as I took a sip. It tasted, surprisingly good. Better than it had in a long time. Perhaps because the bitterness was gone from my mouth, replaced by something like resolve. And oddly, hope. I lifted the mug in a small toast to the framed photo of Linda on the wall. "To justice," I murmured. "And to possible reconciliation, if it's earned." Outside, the sun broke fully through the clouds at last, sending a beam of light through my window. It illuminated the table, the photo, and my hands wrapped around the coffee cup. I sat there a long while, letting the sun warm my face, feeling, for the first time in years, truly in control of my life, and at peace with whatever came next. 3 months have passed. Easter Sunday arrived with unseasonably warm weather and the sound of laughter in my backyard. The grill sizzled with burgers and hot dogs, the simple fare Mark always loved as a kid. Now his own kids were running around with my neighbor's children, hunting pastel eggs among the tulips and daffodils that Rosa had helped me plant along the fence. I watched as Emma, my granddaughter, held up a pink plastic egg in triumph. "Grandpa, look. I found another one," she called out, her face flushed with pride. "I see that, sweetheart." I called back, clapping lightly. "You've got the sharpest eyes in the family." Mark was standing near the picnic table, arranging buns and condiments. He caught my eye and we shared a brief smile. A genuine one. It had been a process, but he'd stuck to his word. They sold the Lexus, downgraded to a sensible used Honda. They put the big house on the market and moved to a smaller home in a modest neighborhood where, as he told me quietly one day, the kids can be happy and we can actually afford. The foreclosure was averted by the sale, and after the dust settled, they had a little left over to clear debts and start an emergency fund. It was basically starting from scratch for them, but they were doing it. I had released the hold on their accounts once I saw the sale go through and debts paid. True to my word, I didn't give them money, but I did help in non-cash ways, like pulling a few strings to get Mark a promotion opportunity at work. He didn't ask, but I figured it was a nudge he deserved for stepping up. And Vanessa, well, she had humbled herself. She never explicitly apologized in so many words to me, but her actions spoke. She took a full-time job to contribute more to the household, and I heard from Mark that she canceled her high-end spa memberships and sold a lot of designer items to add to their savings. She was quieter around me, almost deferential, and that was apology enough for now. In time, maybe our relationship would heal. She had been raised in privilege and learned a hard lesson in humility. I could already see a kinder side of her emerging, especially in how she saw that keeping me from the kids was cruel. Now she actively invited me to spend time with them, likely recognizing that I was an asset money couldn't replace. "Dad, need another burger on there?" Mark's voice brought me back. He held up an uncooked patty. "Throw one on for Rosa," I replied, waving toward my neighbor who was chatting with my daughter-in-law by the garden. Seeing the two women smile together over some conversation about roses made me feel a quiet satisfaction. Not long ago, I'd wondered if my family would ever blend with others peacefully again. As Mark tended the grill, he came to stand next to me. We looked out at the scene, children playing, ladies talking, a day as normal and pleasant as one could hope. He cleared his throat. "Dad. I want to say again," I held up a hand. "You've said it plenty already, son." "I know." He nodded, eyes misting just a bit. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I put an arm around his shoulders. He stiffened in surprise, then relaxed into it. "How about just spending the rest of your life being the man I always knew you could be? That's all I want." He swallowed and smiled. "I'll do my best." We stood there in comfortable silence for a moment. I realized this was the first holiday in years that I'd hosted at my house. It was small and unassuming, with mismatched patio chairs and an old grill, but it was filled with family, real family, by blood and by bond. As we rejoined the others, Emma ran up and tugged on her father's pant leg. "Daddy. Mommy said I can have cake now, please." Her face was smeared with a bit of chocolate already. Rosa had been sneaking treats. He laughed and scooped her up. "All right, princess, one small piece. But only if Grandpa gets one too, we have to be fair." She turned to me, eyes bright. "Grandpa, will you have cake with me?" I chuckled, reaching out to tweak her little nose. "You bet I will. I never say no to cake." As Mark carried her toward the table, he glanced back at me over his shoulder. "Love you, Dad," he said, in a voice that was steady and true. I felt a warmth bloom in my chest that no betrayal or hardship could snuff out. "I love you too, son," I replied. And I did, more cautiously perhaps, and tempered by hard-earned wisdom, but I loved him. Because in the end, he was mine and I was his, and we were finding our way out of the darkness together. I walked over to join my family, the aroma of grilled food and the sound of children's laughter swirling in the spring air. There was a place set for me at the head of the table, and on my plate a slice of cake that Emma had proudly placed there with her tiny hands. As I sat down, Vanessa handed me a fork with a small smile. "Don't worry," she said softly so only I could hear, with a touch of wry humor, "we didn't steal this from you. It's store-bought." I looked at her, surprised, and then a genuine laugh burst out of me. She laughed too, a little nervously, but it was a good sign. A peace offering in the form of a joke. "Best cake I've ever had," I said, and I meant far more than the dessert. Across the table, Mark caught my eye and grinned, that same old grin I knew from long ago. In that moment, I felt Linda's presence like a warm breeze, and I knew somewhere she was smiling, too, proud that I had kept my promise in the end. Our boy was finding his way, and I had helped him do it by not letting him walk all over me, but by guiding him back to the right path the only way I could. Justice had been served, lessons learned, and as I took my first bite of cake with my family around me, I allowed myself something I hadn't truly felt in a long, long time, a satisfying sense of resolution.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.